think about the foundations of Western civilization, it takes me to my history class at school when I'm thinking about the Industrial Revolution, science and technology changing society. You go a little bit further back and you think about how science was really starting to build in the great universities, Oxford and Cambridge, Newton and the apple, was it King James, I think, who started the Royal Society. So for me, it's around that kind of paradigm of science and technology. I think the achievements of Western civilizations to this point are around electricity, convenience. When you think of the time we spent in basic sort of tasks keeping alive, if you peel back the centuries, and then you look right now, how our basic tasks of keeping alive are kind of really contained in this context. And does that really give us the chance to cognitive offload so we can drive the future in a much more meaningful way? I think in our Western civilization we give a lot of airplay to the negative, and appropriately so. But what about the 90+% of positive? What about sharing good news stories? What about the sheer volume of energy out there helping each other and helping make the future better? I think that's what we undervalue. We give too much oxygen to the far smaller negative in our society. I think if a young person's dismissive of the West's achievements, then you have to peel that back a bit and think about why. And what is it that makes them maybe cynical or dismissive? And really, what are they taking for granted? And challenge. What is it that when you get up in the morning, you take for granted? The fact that you have food on the table, hot water in the shower, electric light bulb, a school to go to. School and education is a privilege, one that shouldn't be wasted. Why? A privilege that gives you choice in life, choice to do something you enjoy, you can contribute to. So I think if I was ever in a situation where I found myself in that context of like, whatever, then I say, well, okay, let's back up the track here. What are you taking for granted and what are you going to contribute in the future? Because in fact, the most important thing I believe is for them to be curious and to be curious about the future and understand that the future won't be better unless they engage, and unless they engage understanding where we've come from. I think when we've talked about our history and we talk about STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, I'm much more comfortable in talking about STEAM, putting the arts in there as well, because it puts it in context. Science isn't done in isolation. We can't isolate science from breathing these days. The clothes we wear, the food we eat, the street we walk down, everything is a function of science and technology mingled with our society. And so to put it into context, we have to understand, how do we make the aesthetic change? I mean, there's examples at lots of different levels. For example, we know that with increased green space in urban environments, there's less depression. Well, that says it all to me. The human spirit is fascinating and unique to the individual. And when I see someone who's suffered a burn injury, it's absolutely vital that I have an understanding of them as a whole person, then focus on the burn wound, the cells in the burn wound, the sort of genetics of those cells, and that's influenced on many different levels. And so to give the best possible care, we have to look at this situation with all those levels taken into account. And so really there's, in my mind, I'm a doctor first, then I'm a surgeon and a scientist. But I come to the table with my blinkers well and truly off. What is it that I can learn from the body of the world's knowledge that I can bring to bear to reduce the suffering. And so in that context, you can learn from so many different places. I absolutely fundamentally believe education gives us choice. I mean, I had that drilled into me from my dad, and I've been blessed at having lots of choice. But there's nothing ever wasted, and if you indulge me, I'll give you an example. When I was at medical school, I took a year out and I did anthropology, physical anthropology and neuroanatomy as a special subject. I looked at the brains of animals from worms to elephants and how the brain changed with different forms of locomotion and specialization of the different animals. I went to work with the Leakeys in East Africa, looking at fossilization of locomotion, of when did we look up across the savannah and start walking on two legs. I then went into medical school, so I was fascinated by the brain and how it was linked with our body. Fast forward, the first paper I ever published was looking at how the nerves in the skin changed when we expanded the skin to create new skin to cover defects and scars. I then fast forward even further, and I can tell you, if you're burnt here, your nerves change here and your brain changes here. As a result, that's work done by a few PhD students that we've worked together with the neurophysiologists. So one day, maybe, with that knowledge, we'll be able to think ourselves whole. Now, that is a way out idea. But maybe what we learn now, based on what we've learned in the past, will actually drive that paradigm. So there's nothing wasted. There's no such thing as education knowledge that's wasted. What it's all about is joining the dots and building a picture, and building the picture like a jigsaw that may be so many millions of pieces you can't grasp it. But if you've got your own little bit of that jigsaw you can contribute to the world's knowledge, then someday somebody will fix that in to their jigsaw, and so it will build. So it makes it exciting. I think in an educational context, everything has to be put into context. And so I remember at school having a lecture from a university lecturer came to visit us, and he was a mathematician. And I was 15, and I still remember him talking about the mathematics of symmetry, biomimicry, and art. I remember the pictures. I remember he was a fascinating speaker. And that is a serious long time ago. And I remembered it started me thinking along this way of how do we put what we know in the scientific context into society. Well, you can't unless you understand some basics around the drivers of society, the drivers of communities. And so I don't think we can divide off STEAM. We need it into STEM. And I don't think we can divide STEM off from our history. And because context is everything. And understanding the usefulness of a new technology or a new piece of information requires a broader education.